The Indianapolis Colts are not done yet. This is Zach Keefer, joined as always with Joel Erickson. This is Chopping Wood. The playoff run continues. They beat the Houston Texans up pretty convincingly last week, 21-7 in the wild card round. You guys know where they're headed. They're headed to Kansas City to face the top-seeded Chiefs. Lots to cover. We'll look back on last Saturday's game. We'll look forward to this Saturday's game and give you our take on how the Colts can pull off the upset. We'll recap the season. We'll touch on Andrew Luck and Frank Reich and Patrick Mahomes and everything that goes into this one Saturday in Kansas City. But from a bigger perspective, there's a couple times Saturday night when I was in Houston covering the game and talking to the players afterward where it kind of just hit me like, this is unbelievable. I mean, this team was 1-5, and they're not just in the playoffs. They're doing damage in the playoffs. And there's no part of me that thinks they're just going to go get run out of town in Kansas City. I think they're a good team that's playing their best football that can pull this thing off. Joel, when you sort of digested Saturday's win in Houston, what were your takeaways?
Really that, in a way, maybe we should have seen it coming more than we did. We talked about we talked last week about Houston being dangerous because they have people that can make explosive plays. But what we didn't necessarily talk as much about is that's kind of what the Colts are good at, is keeping people from getting plays, both on offense and defense. They don't let you get sacks. They don't let you hit the deep ball. They don't do that kind of stuff. And so if you're a team like the Texans that's built around big playmakers, you might have a tough time against a Colts team that's really good at taking that stuff away from you. And so it's one of those things where you felt like it was – I felt all last week it was going to be a back-and-forth game, and then you're watching it and you're like, wait, this makes total sense. This is exactly like the way – in retrospect, this makes sense.
You're totally right. That's a really good point. They don't let teams make those game-winning plays. How do you win games in this league? You sack the quarterback, you force turnovers, and you hit on the big play, the 50-yard pass once in a while. The Colts just don't give those up. Look across the roster. I mean, where's the biggest weakness on this team? You would have probably said lack of depth at the receiver position a month ago, but the way Dontrell Inman has stepped up, he's sort of covered up those holes. Now, I'm not saying they're the deepest wide receiver group in football, but Inman has really made some plays, and T.Y. Hilton's been fantastic. And then I look at the defense, and I don't see any weaknesses at all three levels. The defensive line is really balanced, and there might not be a home run hitter in terms of 12 sacks. Danico Autry had 9 this year, and he missed 4 games. Marcus Hunt had a career year. Tyquan Lewis, who we don't think is going to play this week, was terrific in the second half of the season. Kamoko Trey has flashed and had another quarterback hit on Saturday. We can talk all day about the linebackers, Anthony Walker and Darius Leonard. But then the guy who really stood out to me was Kenny Moore on Saturday. I just think he's a great football player. He's so physical. This defense really has become an embodiment of him and Darius Leonard. It's fast and it's really physical. You saw what they did with Kenny on Saturday late in the game. They basically had him blitzing on every play. And you talked to Kenny this week sort of about his growth, not only this season but across this 2-year run he's had in the NFL that really was never supposed to get started. I mean, this is a guy that doesn't even believe what he's doing right now.
Yeah, no, he said something along the lines of, you don't realize what your potential is until you've kind of hit it. And I think it'd be hard for Kenny Moore, who spent the whole draft process and his time with the Patriots, and he knows that he's too short for Chris Ballard's normal requirements. Like, he knows that. It makes sense that he doesn't feel like that, because a guy like Kenny Moore coming from Valdosta State at his size knows it's not supposed to just happen. I mean,
he had to be convinced to play high school football.
Yeah.
I mean, this just wasn't supposed to happen. And look at what he's become.
But the thing is, and this is Kenny didn't say this, but it sticks out to me from when I did the story on Matt Eberflus. Lovie Smith was talking about the kinds of players that a defense has to have to play the style of defense they have. He said, you've got to have interior pass rushers, you've got to have good linebackers, and then you have to have safeties and corners who tackle. And that's Kenny Moore. Kenny Moore is perfect fit for the defense the Colts are playing right now, because he tackles, he plays aggressively, he plays exactly the way they need him to.
He had 76 tackles this year. He's a cornerback.
And he plays so much bigger than 5'9". The last quarterback he had on Saturday, he ran right through Lamar Miller, and Lamar Miller outweighs him by roughly 30 pounds. So it's crazy to say this, but the guy he reminds me of, the way he's playing right now, is he reminds me of pre-injury Honey Badger. A guy playing out of the slot.
All over the field.
Aggressive. That's who he reminds me of. And it feels crazy to say that because Tyrann Mathieu, this big name with this big pedigree at LSU, and almost was in the Heisman race, and Kenny Moore from Valdosta State, but that's how he's playing right now.
If you've been watching Colts games, you've seen this. Those of you who've watched every game this season, and I tweeted it out Saturday, he might be the second best player on the defense. I'm not taking a slight at Malik Hooker. I know the big play potential he brings. Who's better besides Darius Leonard? I mean, Kenny Moore has been that valuable for this team this year. And sometimes, and this is sort of the cool part about football, sometimes it just doesn't matter. All the other stuff, all the intangibles, all the measurements, all that combine stuff, sometimes guys are just football players. Like Darius Leonard's just a football player. He's just a really fast, great athlete who can tackle well and has this drive, determination, and grit that really makes him so good at what he does. You could move him and he could play a lot of different positions. I mean, think about Darius Leonard on special teams. He'd be a freak. Kenny Moore just is a great football player. In the slot, out wide, blitzing. He just gets stuff done. And those are sort of the off-the-radar signings that Chris Ballard has really made over the last 2 years that have filled out this roster in a way that's given this team a chance to make an incredible run from 1-5 to the divisional round of the playoffs.
Pierre Desir is another one.
Right.
Pierre Desir is another one, a guy, Lindenwood, and he didn't make it with a couple teams, and now he's held like DeAndre Hopkins.
He went to Lindenwood, and he shut down DeAndre Hopkins twice in a month.
Yeah. And when we say shut down, we mean the two lowest receiving yardage totals he had all season. Every other game, Pierre Desir, every other game that Hopkins played, Pierre Desir beat all of those in his 2 games. And he's done it for some reason. He matches up really well with Hopkins. That's part of it. But the other thing is he's been kind of doing this a little bit here in the back half of the season. The Colts are really leaning on him, and he's playing like it. He's playing like it. I think the thing is the secondary felt to me like a place where they had to upgrade a lot, and now all of a sudden they've got some guys coming into their own. Quincy Wilson is another guy who's coming into his own, and it just doesn't feel like it's as much of a liability anymore.
Well, that's a good segue because we're about to see how good the secondary is because they're going to play the best quarterback in football this year in Patrick Mahomes. And like you mentioned, the one thing this Colts team hasn't done over the last 8 weeks, I think they're the number 2 scoring defense in football since midseason, is they haven't let the big play kill them. There have been a couple against the Giants, but they've really, really been disciplined in that, and that's a huge credit to Matt Eberflus. But what does the Kansas City Chiefs do? They hit on the big play. They have a freak at quarterback with an arm that, Frank Reich said, look, it's a generational arm talent. And he doesn't throw that around lightly. He's a quarterback guy. But that's what they're going to face Saturday in Kansas City. Can they keep Mahomes away from the big play?
That's the hardest thing about Kansas City, and the statistic that sticks out to me most about Kansas City is that they are immune to the kind of game where you just wonder what happened to their offense. The lowest amount of points the Chiefs scored this year, I believe, is 26.
And they'll make mistakes, and he'll have 2 interceptions and then still throw 4 touchdowns.
So they didn't have a single Colts-Jaguars game. They didn't have a single game like the Saints had against the Cowboys or the Rams had against the Bears. They scored in every single game, and they did it against good defenses. They played the Ravens. They played the Chargers twice. They
put 50 against the Rams.
They played Denver, who's a great defense. So it's an offense that's essentially they're not going to come out and have a bad day. It's not going to happen. And they present a lot of problems. If you look at the way their breakup of their passing goes, it really comes down to 2 guys, and then a bunch of other people who make catches when needed. But the problem is those two guys are so good and so complementary that it's really hard to know what to do.
I mean, they're two of the best.
You
Kelce
have to roll
Tyreek.
coverage to Tyreek Hill because, like T.Y. Hilton, I think T.Y. and Tyreek Hill are similar in one specific way. Everyone knows that they're going to try to get deep, and it doesn't usually matter.
Right.
So you have to roll coverage
Except
to
for the
Tyreek
Houston
Hill.
Texans, who had no idea T.Y. Hilton was going to go deep. On the first series on Saturday, who would have thought they'd go to T.Y. for 3 times for 63 yards? I didn't see it coming, especially after he wore the clown mask. I don't know what they're thinking down there in Houston.
And then if you roll coverage, then you have Kelce working the inside, and you can't double him because you've already rolled coverage.
And he's terrific. He's terrific. He's such an athlete. This is going to be a huge test to see how the Colts cover 2 holds up. I think they have the good scheme in place to handle this. They're going to give up yards. They're going to give up a lot underneath, and I think they're going to give up 4 or 5 yard runs pretty consistently. Darius Leonard's going to have a really big day ahead of him in terms of what is on his plate. He's going to have a lot of tackles, but he's going to have to be in coverage sometimes too. And if they can keep the big play, those big 50-yard shots out of the Chiefs' game plan, that's going to be their best method of success. If they give up long drives and field goals, that's fine. I think that's what the Colts know they need to do to win. I mean, he's talking to Eric Ebron on Saturday. This is after the Houston game, and he said, look, we got to outscore them. That's how we win. We got to outscore them. So it's going to be up to the Colts defense, and I'm liking the Colts defense against the Chiefs defense because the Colts defense, without a doubt, is better. And I think Andrew Luck and I think Marlon Mack is going to get this offense rolling. You got to like them and their ability to put up some points Saturday, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The Chiefs defense, unlike a lot of the teams that the Colts have been playing lately, the Colts have played a lot of good defenses lately. Dallas, Houston, Tennessee, Jacksonville. These are really good defenses.
Right, all since December.
Tennessee is not a good defense. Tennessee
they
can
get after the quarterback, though.
They can do one thing really well. They rush the passer well. They had 52 sacks. But to have their defensive rankings, there's something like 28th in the league in total defense. To have 52 sacks and be 28th in the league in total defense is mind-boggling.
Their secondary is just shaky.
It's just banged up.
It's just vulnerable.
It's banged up. Eric Berry is, I think, the latest I've seen is day-to-day. I think they've got some issues with Kendall Fuller. It's a banged up secondary.
Behind Fuller, it's it's thin.
The other thing is the Colts. What the Chiefs are bringing at the Colts is actually their strength. What do the Colts not do anymore? They don't give up sacks at all.
0 sacks on Andrew Luck on Saturday. 18 on him in the regular season, which is the best in football. If they can negate the pass rush as best they can, if they can get that run game going, which is going to be a snowy game.
Kansas City's 31st against the run. 31st.
I feel like that's how they can do this. I feel like that's the game plan. It's not rocket science. Frank Reich knows how you win in the playoffs. He told his O-lineman before the game last Saturday, he said, look, we're going to win this game up front. Then they went out and did exactly that. They had 200 rushing yards as a team. Marlon Mack had 148, which is more than any Colt in franchise history. That's getting this offensive line to buy in. They're the formula right now, and I think you ride that in Kansas City on Saturday because I think it works.
Yeah, there's a clear path. I'm not saying this is how the game is going to go. I'm saying the way the clear path for the Colts to win is the offensive line takes over the game. They negate the pass rush. Marlon Mack and Andrew Luck both take advantage of all that iffiness behind the front for Kansas City. And then the defense, I don't think the defense has to shut them down the way they've shut other people down. But I think this is where Matt Eberflus's emphasis on turnovers becomes huge.
Ding.
You rip a ball out. Mahomes leaves like one a game.
Yeah, he'll make some questionable decisions. And you know who I'm thinking of? This is the first guy that came to mind when I really studied this matchup is Malik Hooker. This is where you make your money, Malik. You're a first-round pick. There's going to be some deep balls over the middle. That's where you use that ball hawking ability to go get the ball. Now, he's in a boot. He didn't practice today. I talked to him yesterday. He said it was cautionary. I think he's out there. I don't think he misses this game. But I think he's huge because he has a great ability in the air to go get the football.
In a game where you have two really good offenses and you're expecting them to trade punches, the thing that always turns it is turnovers. Think back to Indianapolis versus Oakland. Derek Carr's playing really well. Colts are kind of they're trading blows, and then Darius Leonard forces a fumble, and that's the game. Like the key turnover is what matters in games like this. And that's where all that emphasis on getting the ball out, all that emphasis that we've seen, all of the skill we've seen from Darius Leonard, from Kenny Moore, guys like that, that's the play they need to make.
There might be less pressure on Andrew Luck on this game as you would assume, because his run game is better than Mahomes, his offensive line is better than Kansas City's, and his defense is better than Kansas City's. Now, let's not underscore the Chiefs. They're the 1 seed for a reason. Like you said, they put up 30 every week. They will just outscore whoever they're playing. But they did, in their losses this year, they lost to good teams. They lost to the Rams. They lost to the Patriots.
Seahawks.
They lost to Seattle. This can be done. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I'm saying I like the Colts, and I like how they're really, really balanced heading into this one. I like that they can lean on something they haven't been able to in a long time, and that's the run game, and that's the offensive line. And like Frank Reich said the day he took over, and like Chris Ballard said the day he took over 2 years ago, we're going to win up front because that's how you win in December and January. Look at how they won Saturday. I think that's the recipe coming ahead to Arrowhead on Saturday.
Just as a football fan, this game is more interesting, is more exciting than really anyone the Colts have played in a long time, because I felt like the Colts had played somehow in an era where the league is passing. The Colts played like 2 months of teams that really want to establish the run and then throw off of that and play good defense. And Kansas City's not any of those things. Kansas City wants to throw first. They don't really play good defense other than their pass rush. So it's going to be I'm interested because we haven't seen the Colts play a team like this in a while. And obviously, as a football fan, we talked about this earlier off the when we weren't podcasting. It's going to be different to see Mahomes make one of these throws in person as opposed to on the TV.
Right. It's going to be different than just watching a highlight where you know he pulls it off. It's going to be real time. It's going to be exciting. I think this is the best game of the weekend. I'm not just saying that because I'm going to be there, but I just think it's going to be awesome to see. You know, and I wrote this a little bit earlier this week, is I think this is the future of the AFC, and that's not a slight to Baker Mayfield or Lamar Jackson or Deshaun Watson, and those are great young quarterbacks, but the Colts are primed for a run here. I don't mean one Super Bowl run. I mean they're gonna challenge for a couple of years here, and the Chiefs aren't going anywhere either. Mahomes is literally the best thing to happen to them in a long time. But here's my question to you, and you're new to this, but you are writing about one of these epic playoff games from a couple of years ago. Everybody remembers 45-44, and it was 38-10 late in the third quarter. Does that matter? Does the history here, Colts have won 4, Chiefs have never beat the Colts in the playoffs. I mean, the Colts have as many playoff wins at Arrowhead Stadium as the Chiefs do, and it's not like the Chiefs never make the playoffs. So does that matter at all come Saturday?
I think it does. And full disclosure, Andy Reid does not agree with me. Adam Vinatieri does not agree with me. Players on both sides of it do not agree with me. But I think this is where it matters. I think that the city of Kansas City, and if you look at what the Kansas City Star has been writing this week and some of the stuff people have been tweeting, I think Kansas City fans know that they're 0-4 against the Colts in the playoffs.
I don't think they wanted to play the Colts.
Feel the pain of because they've lost in some terrible ways, not just the comeback game.
Their kicker went 0 for 3 in a 96 while divisional game.
They lost the no punt game.
They lost the no punt game to Peyton Manning in 2003. They lost a lead that was 38-10 a couple years ago at Lucas Oil Stadium.
And this is where I think it comes into play, and this is why I think that history matters. Arrowhead is one of the best, loudest places to play in the NFL. Everybody says it. And here's the thing. The fan base, maybe it doesn't matter to the players on the field. Maybe a lot of them weren't there. But the fan base in that stands remembers all of those games. And so when things happen on Saturday for the Colts, I think they start to get a little on edge where maybe they wouldn't if you're in a confident state of mind, if you feel like your team's going to win.
Well, and it's not like the Chiefs have had a ton of playoff success even when they're not playing the Colts the last couple of years.
So I think from an atmosphere standpoint, and I do think atmosphere matters. I think from an atmosphere standpoint, I do think that history matters because if you're a Chiefs fan, you cannot help yourself.
Yeah.
You're going into this game.
It's human nature.
Worry. You just are.
And what have the Colts done the last 2 games on the road in the first quarter? They went to Tennessee in a win-and-in game, and they marched down the field twice for 2 touchdowns and took a 14-zip lead. They went to Houston in a wild card game, marched down the field twice, and took a 14-zip lead. They just came out and punched their opponent in the mouth. If they do that on Saturday against the number 1 seed at Arrowhead, I guarantee you the Kansas City Chiefs fans that are there are going to be thinking, oh no, here we go again. Now, they're always in the game because Mahomes can score 20 points in 3 minutes. But I guarantee you it won't be just in the fans' minds, but it might pop into a couple of players' minds as well, because that's how it works, and they've had a week off, and we'll see. But without a doubt, I'm pumped for this one. It's going to be a really, really fun game and an awesome atmosphere.
Yeah, and like I said, just the football stuff. We alluded to the pass rush a little bit. The Chiefs' pass rush is interesting because of the way those guys play. Their right side is D. Ford. He's a speed guy. The left side is Justin Houston, who's kind of a speed power. They've got a really good interior rusher in Chris Jones. In a way, maybe they're a little bit more like Jacksonville in the pass rush than the other teams the Colts have played.
Yeah, I mean Braden Smith,
Maybe.
the guy that might be the forgotten man on the offensive line. I mean, he did his job on Saturday against J.J. Watt, and Watt made that great play in the first quarter that really prevented it from being 28-0. But Braden Smith really held up, and I just can't say this enough this season. When Ryan Kelly got back and Mark Lewinsky got back, it's a different offensive line. That's the offensive line that hasn't allowed a sack, I think, in 7 games this year. And I believe they're the first unit to do that 7 times in a season since the Denver Broncos in 2012. So, I mean, we're talking about like 5-6 years of no one in the NFL being able to do what this offensive line has done. So that's obviously huge. That's where 3rd and 1s, 3rd and 12s turn into 3rd and 1s. That's where the sacks can really derail your offense. I just see them sticking with the formula and not getting cute and running the ball. I think Frank Reich needs to be patient in that regard. If it doesn't get going early, stick with it. They were able to wear Houston down, and you saw what Marlon Mack did in the 4th quarter on Saturday. I mean, he just butchered them, and he was terrific. Don't take credit away from Marlon because he really has come into his own this season. So it'll be really interesting to see if the Colts offense, 1, no turnovers, 2, run the ball, maybe an X factor, maybe Dontrell Inman can snag another touchdown. He's got 1 in the last 2 games. If he can get some catches, if Eric Ebron can do what he usually does, if T.Y. Hilton's ankle can hold up, they'll be able to offensively keep up with Kansas City.
Yeah, I mentioned Jacksonville. I realize now that probably makes some Colts fans seize up a little bit after the shutout. Here's the flip side. I don't feel like Jacksonville's front is why they got shut out. I feel like it was Jalen Ramsey and the linebackers.
Ramsey played as well as a cornerback can play.
Yeah, I think it was the back 7. And here's the thing about Kansas City. They have a lot of talent up front. They don't have any of that talent in the back 7.
And they've got names. They've got Justin Houston and D. Ford, but they're 30th against the run, and their secondary has been giving up
their
tons
defensive
of points
line,
all year.
Their defensive line is just for pass rushing.
Right. And Andrew Luck, the way he's playing right now, if he doesn't have to do too much, that's when he's at his most dangerous. Houston, they had a great run game, so he just picked his spots, and he just drilled Eric Ebron for a touchdown, drilled Dontrell Inman for a touchdown, and the Texans never really had a chance after that.
I'll say the other thing, and I haven't gotten a chance to really look at it yet, but I want to go back a little bit here and look at the rest of the Chiefs' schedule because they don't play a lot of quarterbacks with Andrew's mobility. They have 52 sacks, but you think about like the teams in their division. It's Phillip Rivers, he's not mobile. Derek Carr's not really that mobile.
Cody Kessler this year.
They don't have some of those. They don't have some, and they played the Patriots. I have to look at the rest of it. They played Russell Wilson, so I want to see how they did against guys like Russell Wilson, how that pass rush did against guys who can move around a lot. Because as good as the offensive line has played, Andrew also deserves a lot of credit for the way he's manipulated the pocket.
Yeah, he's been really, really good at that. And the one play that comes to mind is the second touchdown in Tennessee. Play broke down. He fled to his left and on a dime just nailed Inman in the back of the end zone. Great play, great throw, awesome catch. But that was a vintage Andrew Luck play right there.
I think you're right. I think Inman is big because you assume that they're going to go after T.Y. Assume that they're going to try to roll coverage T.Y.
Maybe they'll learn the lesson the Texans didn't learn or haven't learned in 4 years.
But the other thing is I think T.Y. is going to have a big game too. It's just not a good secondary behind it because I said earlier that Kansas City hasn't scored fewer than 26 points. But if you look at a lot of their games, they're close because their defense gives up a lot of points.
And the one thing for me that's really jumped out the last month or so is T.Y. is playing on this banged-up ankle. But, going back to camp, I mean, it was like day 2, and it was just like, whoa, him and Andrew are back on the same page. And I'll be honest, I thought it was going to take a while. It didn't. And T.Y. said, even last year, even early this year, he's like, we'll be fine. Give us a day. He was right. And I don't know what it is, but these two just have this connection on the football field where they think like they're one, and it manifests itself every single Sunday. You see it out there. Some of these sideline throws Luck is making and T.Y. is grabbing are just insane. They're just impossible to defend. When those two are operating like that, it's almost impossible to stop this offense from getting 20-plus points because it's just you can't defend those throws. And then when you get the run game going, courtesy of Quentin Nelson, courtesy of Anthony Costanzo, Ryan Kelly, Mark Lewinsky, and Braden Smith, the Colts offense is going to move the ball. They're going to keep the clock on their side, and that's how you win ugly games this time of year. And I think that could be how this thing plays out on Saturday.
They can't turn it over.
Right. I think a couple of guys are key. I think Malik Hooker can change the game in the back end for Indianapolis. I think you're right about the turnovers.
They've played some teams where the turnover doesn't hurt you. You cannot give Patrick Mahomes extra possessions this week. You cannot do it.
Right. And the third guy I'll mention as a wild card sort of X factor would be Adam Vinatieri, the 46-year-old kicker. We all know about his history in bad weather. I still think the kick he made last year, it was like a 40-yarder in that 8 inches of blizzard in Buffalo, was the best kick maybe I've ever seen in my life, maybe in NFL history. He said the snow game against the Raiders was a bigger kick because of the situation, but not necessarily a harder kick. So they could be in the snow on Saturday. It could be a tight game, and it doesn't hurt to have the best kicker in NFL history on your side. So it's going to be a fun one. Any last thoughts, Joel, before we head to KC for the divisional round?
No, I mean, other than just if anybody's going out there for it, I'm expecting this to be a really cool playoff atmosphere. Arrowhead is kind of off by itself. There's giant parking lots. The tailgating there is better than just about anywhere else in the NFL. So the fans are going to be out there forever. It's one of the loudest stadiums in the NFL. This one's going to feel like a big, huge game just from the atmosphere. I mean, I know it's a big, huge game. Everyone's talking about it. But just if you're driving over there, if you're flying there, this one's going to feel like a big game when you park your car.
And it didn't feel like that in Houston a week ago. And I know it was just the first round of the playoffs, but after the Colts kind of jumped ahead 14-0, it just kind of felt like they had control of the game and it was never in doubt after that. I think you're totally right. I think it's going to be totally different in Kansas City. I can't wait. I've never been to Arrowhead before. And the first thing Chris Ballard said, we were in the press box in Houston, and when this game was over on Saturday, when he realized they were going to Kansas City, which is where he spent 4 years before he was tapped general manager here in January 2017, he said, it's going to be an amazing atmosphere. So I think he's right. I think it might be the best playoff game of the weekend, at least with this matchup. And I don't think the Colts are scared. They earned the right to be here. They've won 10 of 11. They've beaten teams in different ways. And this defense is really balanced, and that's going to help. So it's going to be a fun one. We will catch up with you guys next week. We will either wrap up the season or we will be talking about the AFC Championship game, if you can believe it. So this is Chopping Wood, and we'll see what happens in Arrowhead on Saturday.